Flags of Our Fathers, directed by Clint Eastwood, first part of his pair of sister films built around the Battle of Iwo Jima during the Second World War, with the second film being called Letters from Iwo Jima. Both shot back to back, both telling essentially the same story from the opposite perspectives. I have now watched both of them back to back as well, and I do feel that this is the correct way that they should be watched and judged, not separately but together. Because viewing both enhances each of them individually, makes it clear how, despite seemingly being quite different stories, both center around similar themes. Flags of Our Fathers is told from the American perspective, and it actually doesn't focus on the battle almost at all. Instead, we flash back and forth between the events on the island and what came next, which was three soldiers receiving lots of glory back home for being portrayed as heroes in the famous flag raising photograph, the very same one you can see on the movie poster. It is one of the most memorable photos of all time, probably, and so it was interesting to me to learn the story behind it, which is that the flag wasn't raised in the middle of a raging battle or even right after it, as the framing of it may suggest. The flag was actually raised in a moment of relative peace on the fifth day of the conflict. And the interesting thing is that the island wasn't actually fully captured back then. The fighting went on for almost a month more. Nonetheless, at the time it was exactly what the US military needed in terms of a morale boost. The photo was circulated in the media, and the soldiers presumed to be in it paraded around the country in the hopes of raising enough money to continue the war effort. We watched the events unfold through the eyes of several of those soldiers, again flashing back and forth between the actual conflict and the touring back at home. And through this perspective, the film serves as a tool to demystify the war as it may have been glorified in the eyes of the American public. It goes to great lengths to show the contrast between what stories we're told and what we see as civilians, and what is the actual truth, what goes on right there when the enemy is firing live rounds at you. It asks an important question: what makes a hero? Does being in a war and accidentally posing in an important photo automatically make you a hero worth worshipping? This is not an easy question to ask, by the way, without taking away the sacrifices of the soldiers that have been there, that have seen battle. But I feel that Eastwood has managed to do it in a balanced way. He does critique the army and the wartime propaganda, but he doesn't do it at the expense of individual soldiers. On the contrary, he shows the effects that the entire situation had on them as well, with PTSD and whatnot. But I do think he comes short of true greatness in the film. I think it comes down mainly to two things. One is the narrative. As interesting as it may seem, it does come across as rather jumbled and messy. Especially at the beginning, it may be difficult to follow what's going on because of all the constant flashing back and forth. Secondly, the film uses a really washed out grey palette, and I wasn't a big fan of it. By which I mean I hated it. I think that, okay, going for a dreary look of the film is one thing, but you can make even a greyish wartime landscape look interesting. Just see Saving Private Ryan, or more recently 1917. But here the cinematography just looks lazy. It's as if you just threw a heavy grey filter on every single frame and called it a day. At times it looks almost like a black and white film, which made me think that it would actually have looked better if the filmmakers fully committed and went for monochrome. As it is, it just looks half-assed. So it's a decent film that raises some interesting points about war and the American army, but it's not an all-time classic, and out of the two, I prefer the other film, Letters from Iwo Jima.